Imagine looking in a mirror and seeing not who you are, but who you're becoming. Now, imagine that reflection could age, rot, and decay while you stay forever young, forever beautiful. But here's the twist. Every sin you commit, every cruelty you inflict, every soul you destroy appears on that reflection instead of your face. Would you take that deal? Would you trade your soul for eternal youth? This is the Faustian bargain at the heart of Oscar Wilde's masterpiece, The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's a story about vanity, corruption, and the terrifying realization that beauty without conscience is the most monstrous thing of all, and by the end, you'll understand why Dorian Gray's final act wasn't murder. It was looking in the mirror. This is The Picture of Dorian Gray, published in 1890 by Oscar Wilde. On the surface, it's a Gothic horror story about a portrait that ages while its subject stays young. But beneath that, it's a brutal examination of aestheticism, morality, and what happens when we worship beauty above everything else. The Portrait in the Studio. Our story begins in the London studio of Basil Hallward, a talented but somewhat obscure painter. Sunlight streams through tall windows onto canvases, brushes, and the smell of oil paint hanging thick in the air. Basil is finishing a portrait, and it's unlike anything he's ever created. The subject is a young man of extraordinary beauty, painted with such care and devotion that the canvas seems to breathe. This is more than a painting. This is worship. Enter Lord Henry Wotton, an aristocrat with a razor-sharp wit and a philosophy that would make the devil blush. He's languid, elegant, and speaks in perfectly formed paradoxes that sound brilliant even when they're morally bankrupt. He's the kind of man who can make evil sound like wisdom. Lord Henry looks at the portrait and immediately understands what Basil is too modest to admit. This painting reveals the artist's soul. Basil has poured his entire being into this work, and Lord Henry can see it. He can see the obsession, the adoration, the dangerous intimacy between artist and subject. Basil confesses that he's afraid to exhibit the portrait publicly because it reveals too much of himself. He's terrified that people will see his feelings, his fascination, his almost worshipful devotion to the young man in the painting. And who is this young man? His name is Dorian Gray. Dorian is 20 years old, stunningly beautiful, with golden hair, blue eyes, and the kind of face that makes the world stop and stare. But more than his physical beauty, there's an innocence about him, a purity that hasn't yet been touched by the world's corruption. He's like a blank canvas, perfect and unspoiled. And that's exactly what makes him dangerous. When Dorian arrives at the studio, Lord Henry sees him for the first time and something clicks in his mind. Here is youth incarnate. Here is beauty that won't last. Here is innocence ripe for corruption. Lord Henry looks at Dorian the way a scientist looks at an experiment. He wants to see what happens when you inject poison into something pure. The poisonous philosophy. While Basil puts the finishing touches on the portrait, Lord Henry begins his seduction. Not a physical seduction, but something far more insidious. He starts talking. And when Lord Henry Wotton talks, the world tilts on its axis. He speaks in epigrams that sound like wisdom. The only way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. I can resist everything except temptation. The aim of life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. He tells Dorian that youth is the only thing worth having, That beauty is the greatest gift the universe can bestow. That time is the enemy, age is a tragedy, and the greatest sin is to waste your youth on virtue when you should be experiencing everything, feeling everything, living without restraint or consequence. He paints morality as a prison and hedonism as liberation. And Dorian, who has never heard anything like this before, drinks it in like a man dying of thirst. Lord Henry tells him, "You have only a few years to live really, perfectly, and fully. When your youth goes, your beauty will go with it. Live. Live the wonderful life that is in you. Let nothing be lost upon you. Be always searching for new sensations. Be afraid of nothing. A new hedonism, that is what our century wants." Dorian listens, transfixed. No one has ever spoken to him this way. His entire life, he's been told to be good, to be modest, to restrain himself. And now here's this brilliant, sophisticated man telling him the opposite, telling him that restraint is death and indulgence is life. It's intoxicating. It's terrifying. It's irresistible. Then Basil unveils the completed portrait, and Dorian sees himself as art, captured at the very peak of his beauty. The painting is perfect, flawless, eternal. And in that moment, looking at his own face preserved in oil and canvas, something breaks inside him. Or maybe something awakens. He realizes that the painting will stay young while he grows old. The painting will remain beautiful while he decays. And the injustice of it, the cruelty of time, suddenly becomes unbearable. In a moment of passion, of vanity, of something darker, Dorian makes a wish. He says he would give anything, even his soul, if the portrait could age instead of him. If the painting could bear the burden of time and sin while he stays forever young. It's said half in jest, half in desperation. But in that dusty London studio, something hears him, something accepts. The corruption of Sybil Vane. Weeks pass. Dorian falls under Lord Henry's spell completely. They spend their days in elegant drawing rooms, discussing art and philosophy, indulging in every pleasure London has to offer. Lord Henry lends Dorian a book, a French novel about a young Parisian who devotes his life to the pursuit of beauty and sensation. The book has no plot, just descriptions of experiences, sins, and aesthetic philosophies. Dorian reads it obsessively. It becomes his Bible, his guide to life. He carries it everywhere, reads it hundreds of times, and slowly it rewrites his soul. Then Dorian falls in love. Her name is Sybil Vane, a 17-year-old actress who performs in a shabby theater in London's East End. She's beautiful in a fragile, ethereal way, and she's the most talented actress Dorian has ever seen. Every night she transforms into Juliet, Ophelia, Desdemona. On stage, she's transcendent. Off stage, she's simple, innocent, completely devoted to her art and to Dorian. Dorian brings Lord Henry and Basil to see her perform. He's ecstatic, convinced they'll see the genius he sees. But that night, something goes wrong. Sybil's performance is terrible, wooden, lifeless. She forgets her lines, misses her cues, delivers every speech with the flatness of someone reading a grocery list. The audience boos. Lord Henry is amused. Basil is uncomfortable. And Dorian is humiliated. After the performance, Dorian storms backstage to confront Sybil. She's radiant, glowing with happiness. She tells him she knows why she was terrible, because she's in love with him. Before, acting was everything because she had nothing else. But now that she has real love, real emotion, the artifice of the theater feels empty and false. She'd rather live her life with him then pretend to live other lives on stage. Dorian is horrified. He didn't fall in love with Sybil Vane, the girl. He fell in love with Sybil Vane, the actress. He fell in love with the art, not the artist. She was beautiful because she could become other people. Now that she wants to be herself, she's useless to him. And, with a cruelty that shocks even him as he speaks, Dorian tells her the truth. He calls her shallow, stupid, boring. He tells her she's killed the one thing he loved about her. He tells her it's over. And then he walks away, leaving her sobbing in her dressing room. Dorian goes home, angry and disappointed. But when he enters his room and looks at the portrait that Basil painted, he notices something impossible, something terrifying. The painting has changed. There's a touch of cruelty around the mouth that wasn't there before, a hardness in the eyes. The expression is subtly different, twisted by something ugly. His wish has come true. The portrait is aging, changing, bearing the weight of his sins, while his face remains perfect. At first Dorian is horrified, then fascinated, then thrilled. He realizes what this means. He can do anything, be anything, experience everything without consequence. The portrait will bear the scars while he stays beautiful forever. It's a miracle. It's a curse. It's freedom. The next morning Lord Henry arrives with news. Sybil Vane is dead. She drank poison and died during the night. Suicide. Dorian is shocked, but Lord Henry spins it into something else. He tells Dorian that her death is tragic and beautiful, like a scene from a play. That Dorian shouldn't feel guilty because the whole thing is too artistic to be real. That mourning is vulgar and life must go on. And Dorian, who was on the verge of remorse, allows himself to be convinced. He buries his guilt. He locks the portrait in a room upstairs, and he vows to live exactly as Lord Henry preaches, without restraint, without conscience, without fear. The descent into darkness. Years pass, 18 years, and in that time, Dorian Gray becomes a legend in London society. He's the most beautiful man anyone has ever seen, and mysteriously, impossibly, he doesn't age. At 38, he looks 20. Men are jealous. Women are obsessed. Rumors swirl about him like smoke, that he's made a pact with the devil, that he's discovered the secret of eternal youth, that he's not entirely human. But there are darker rumors, too. Whispers about his influence over young men who fall into ruin after befriending him. Stories about opium dens in London's poorest districts, where Dorian is seen in the early morning hours. Tales of affairs, betrayals, cruelties. Several young aristocrats have killed themselves after knowing him. Women's reputations have been destroyed. Families have been torn apart. But Dorian is too charming, too beautiful, too well connected to be confronted directly. And he's learned the art of plausible deniability. Nothing can be proven. Everything can be explained away. Dorian collects experiences the way other men collect stamps. He studies perfumes, travels to Paris for exotic scents that take years to create. He becomes obsessed with jewels, amassing collections of emeralds, sapphires, rubies, studying their history and symbolism. He explores music, religion, philosophy. He reads forbidden books and attends secret ceremonies. He pursues sensation for its own sake, always chasing the next thrill, the next experience, the next sin. And every few months, when no one is watching, he locks the door to the upstairs room, pulls back the curtain that covers the portrait, and looks at what he's become. The painting is hideous now. The face in the frame is twisted with age and corruption. The mouth is cruel, the eyes are cold and dead, the skin is sagging and spotted with the marks of vice. Every sin is recorded there. Every cruelty is written on that painted face. The portrait has become a diary of his soul, and the diary is filled with horror. But Dorian doesn't stop. He can't stop. Because as long as the portrait bears the consequences, he's free. As long as his face stays beautiful, the world will forgive him anything. Beauty is his shield, his weapon, his license to destroy. Basil's return and the first murder on the night before Dorian's 38th birthday. Basil Hallward comes to visit. They haven't spoken in years. Basil has heard the rumors about Dorian, and he's deeply troubled. He loves Dorian, perhaps has always loved him, and he can't reconcile the beautiful young man he painted with the monster everyone whispers about. Basil wants answers. He wants Dorian to deny the rumors, to explain, to prove that he's still the innocent boy who sat in that studio 18 years ago. Dorian is cold, dismissive. Basil presses. He talks about the young men who've been ruined, the families destroyed, the trail of suffering Dorian has left behind. He begs Dorian to reform, to seek redemption, to remember who he used to be. And something in Dorian snaps. Not anger, exactly. More like irritation, like swatting a mosquito. He invites Basil upstairs. He shows him the portrait. Basil stares in horror at the grotesque, corrupted face in the painting he created. He recognizes his own brushstrokes, his own technique. But the subject has become unrecognizable. This isn't the beautiful boy he loved. This is a monster. This is Dorian's true face, and it's hideous beyond belief. Basil falls to his knees, horrified, and begs Dorian to pray with him, to seek forgiveness, to save his soul before it's too late. And Dorian looks at him with eyes as cold as winter and realizes that Basil knows too much. Basil has seen the truth, and the truth can't be allowed to exist. There's a knife on the table near the portrait. Dorian picks it up, and before Basil can even process what's happening, Dorian stabs him. Again and again and again. The violence is sudden, mechanical, emotionless. Basil dies on the floor of the locked room, blood pooling around the portrait that captured his love and devotion 18 years ago. Dorian feels nothing, no remorse, no horror, just the practical problem of disposing of a body. He contacts an old acquaintance, a chemist named Alan Campbell, and blackmails him into dissolving Basil's body with chemicals. Alan does the work, then goes home and shoots himself. Another suicide in Dorian's wake. Another life destroyed. Dorian looks at the portrait after the murder. Blood drips from the painted hands now. The face is even more twisted, more evil. But Dorian's reflection in the mirror is still perfect, still young, still beautiful. The haunting of James Vane. But the past isn't finished with Dorian Gray. One evening, while visiting an opium den in London's slums, Dorian is followed by a sailor, a rough, desperate man with murder in his eyes. This is James Vane, Sybil's brother. He's spent 18 years searching for the man who destroyed his sister, and he's finally found him. He drags Dorian into an alley, presses a gun to his head, ready to pull the trigger and avenge his sister's death. But Dorian laughs. He tells James to look at his face. He says that Sybil Vane killed herself 18 years ago. He, Dorian Gray, is barely 38 years old now, which means he would have been 20 when Sybil died. And does he look like a man of 38? Does he look like he could have been alive 18 years ago? Look at his face. He's practically a boy. James hesitates. It's true. The man in front of him looks no more than 20 years old. Smooth skin, no wrinkles, the face of youth. He must have the wrong man. He releases Dorian and watches him disappear into the night. But later, a woman from the opium den tells James the truth. That man was Dorian Gray, and he's looked exactly the same for nearly 2 decades. Some kind of devil's bargain keeps him young. James realizes he's been tricked. He begins hunting Dorian in earnest, tracking him to his country estate, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. During a hunting party at Dorian's estate, one of the guests accidentally shoots and kills a man who was hiding in the bushes. When they check the body, it's James Vane. Dorian nearly faints with relief. The past has tried to kill him, and the past is dead. The final confrontation with himself, but something is breaking inside Dorian. The close call with James, the accumulation of sins, the weight of decades of corruption. It's all becoming too much. He's tired. He's haunted. The portrait upstairs has become unbearable to look at. Every sin is recorded there in grotesque detail. The face in the painting is now that of an old man, twisted by cruelty and vice, loathsome beyond description. Dorian starts to wonder if reform is possible. He performs a single act of mercy, sparing a young girl he was planning to seduce and ruin. Surely that counts for something. Surely one good deed can start to erase the decades of evil. He goes upstairs to look at the portrait, expecting to see some improvement, some softening of the hideous features, but the portrait has only gotten worse. Now there's something new in the painted face. Hypocrisy. The cunning look of someone who performs a good deed only to feel virtuous, not because it's right. Even his attempt at redemption has become another sin. Dorian is filled with rage and despair. He realizes that the portrait will never let him go. It's a mirror of his soul, and his soul is corrupt beyond saving. As long as the portrait exists, he'll never be free. The painting is both his salvation and his damnation. It's kept him young, yes, but it's also a permanent record of every evil thing he's ever done. There's only one solution. The portrait must be destroyed. He finds the same knife he used to kill Basil Hallward. How fitting that the weapon of his first murder should be the weapon of his last. He raises the knife above his head and plunges it into the canvas, stabbing at the hideous face, slashing at the painted evidence of his crimes. He attacks it with fury, with desperation, with the hope that destroying the portrait will somehow free him, cleanse him, make him human again. The servant's discovery. Downstairs, the servants hear a terrible scream, then a crash, then silence. They rush upstairs and find the door to the locked room barred from the inside. They call for help, force the door open, and enter the room. What they find doesn't make sense, can't make sense. There's a portrait hanging on the wall. It shows a young man of extraordinary beauty, perhaps 20 years old, with golden hair and innocent blue eyes. The painting is flawless, perfect, exactly as Basil Hallward painted it decades ago. And on the floor, beneath the portrait, is a corpse. An old man in evening clothes, withered and wrinkled and grotesque. His face is twisted with age and corruption, marked by every sin and vice imaginable. He's clutching a knife, and it takes several moments before the servants realize the truth. This corpse, this hideous old man, is Dorian Gray. The moment he stabbed the portrait, the curse reversed. The sins returned to their rightful owner. Time caught up all at once. Dorian Gray destroyed the portrait. And in doing so, he destroyed himself. The painting shows the man he could have been. The corpse shows the man he actually was. The double trap. But here's the question Oscar Wilde wants us to ask. Was the portrait really the problem? Or was Dorian doomed from the moment Lord Henry Wotton started talking? The portrait didn't make Dorian evil. It simply removed the consequences. And without consequences, Dorian revealed what he truly was. A monster wearing a beautiful mask. We like to think that morality is about belief, about conscience, about knowing right from wrong. But Wilde suggests something more disturbing. That morality might just be fear of consequences. That we're good only because we're afraid of punishment, aging, social judgment. Take away those fears, and what's left? Take away the mirror that shows our true face, and what do we become? Dorian's tragedy isn't that he made a deal with the devil. His tragedy is that he made a deal with himself. He chose beauty over truth. He chose pleasure over meaning. He chose eternal youth over an examined life. And in the end, those choices consumed him. The philosophy of aestheticism. Oscar Wilde was the champion of aestheticism. The belief that art and beauty are the highest values, more important than morality or truth. He famously said, "There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written, that is all." He believed that art should be pursued for its own sake, not as a vehicle for moral lessons. But the picture of Dorian Gray complicates that philosophy. Is Wilde arguing against aestheticism? Is he showing us the danger of valuing beauty above all else? Or is he doing something more subtle? Lord Henry Wotton speaks in Wilde's own epigrams. Many of the paradoxes and witticisms in the novel are things Wilde said in real life. So, is Lord Henry the villain, or is he the truth-teller? Perhaps Wilde is showing us that aestheticism, like any philosophy taken to its extreme, becomes monstrous. Beauty without conscience is just cruelty with style. Art without morality is just narcissism in expensive clothing. Dorian doesn't fail because he loves beauty. He fails because he loves nothing else. The Victorian Hypocrisy. The Picture of Dorian Gray was published in 1890, during the height of Victorian England, a society built on appearances and propriety. The Victorians were obsessed with looking moral while doing deeply immoral things. They preached chastity while running rampant prostitution. They claimed to value virtue while building an empire on slavery and exploitation. They were, in many ways, a society-wide version of Dorian Gray, beautiful on the surface, rotting underneath. Wilde himself was a victim of this hypocrisy. 5 years after publishing Dorian Gray, he was imprisoned for homosexuality, his life destroyed by the very society he'd critiqued in his novel. The Victorians could tolerate Wilde's wit, his genius, his art, as long as he hid his true self. But the moment his private life became public, they turned on him with savage cruelty. Just like Dorian, Wilde learned that Victorian society demanded a beautiful mask, and anyone who removed that mask was destroyed. So, the Picture of Dorian Gray isn't just about one man's corruption. It's about an entire society that values appearance over reality, that worships beauty and punishes truth. Dorian's portrait is hidden in a locked room. Victorian sin was hidden behind closed doors. but neither stays hidden forever. The soul in the mirror at the heart of this story is a question that's haunted humanity forever. What is the soul? Is it something separate from our actions? Is it damaged by our sins? Can it be seen, measured, captured? The portrait is Wilde's answer. The soul is real. It records everything. You can hide it from the world, but you can't hide it from yourself. Dorian spends decades avoiding the portrait, covering it with cloth, locking it away, but he keeps going back to look at it. Why? Because part of him needs to see the truth. Part of him craves confrontation with his real self. We all do this. We avoid mirrors, literal and metaphorical, that show us who we really are, but we keep glancing back. We keep checking. Because deep down, we need to know if we're still human. The portrait is also a metaphor for memory. Our past selves watch us. Every version of who we were is still there, recording, judging. Dorian can't escape the boy he used to be, because that boy is in the painting, watching him transform into a monster. And that's what makes the ending so perfect. When Dorian stabs the portrait, he's trying to kill his own conscience, his own past, his own capacity for guilt. But you can't kill those things. You can only pretend they don't exist until they destroy you. The danger of influence. Lord Henry Wotton is the real villain of this story. He doesn't commit any crimes himself. He doesn't directly hurt anyone. He just talks. But his words are poison. He takes an innocent young man and fills his head with a philosophy that destroys him. He plants seeds and watches them grow into monsters. Wilde is warning us about the power of ideas. Bad philosophy, elegantly expressed, can ruin lives. We think of evil as something dramatic, murder, violence, cruelty. But sometimes evil is just a well-spoken man in a comfortable chair, explaining why morality doesn't matter. Sometimes evil is persuasion. Sometimes it's just being convinced that you deserve to take whatever you want. Lord Henry sees Dorian as an experiment. He wants to see what happens when you remove all moral restraints from a beautiful young person. And the answer is, they become a monster. But Lord Henry never faces consequences. He never suffers. He watches the tragedy unfold with detached amusement. He's the aesthete to the end, observing suffering as if it were art, caring about style more than substance. And that might be Wilde's darkest insight, that the people who corrupt others often escape unpunished. It's their victims who burn. The impossibility of redemption. Dorian's final attempt at goodness is heartbreaking in its futility. He spares one girl from seduction, does one decent thing, and expects his soul to be cleansed. But that's not how morality works. You can't erase decades of cruelty with one kind gesture. You can't balance the scales by tipping them slightly in the other direction after years of weight on the wrong side. Wilde is showing us that redemption, if it exists at all, requires more than symbolic gestures. It requires genuine transformation. And Dorian doesn't want transformation. He wants the appearance of transformation. He wants to feel virtuous without changing who he is. That's why the portrait adds hypocrisy to his list of sins, because even his attempt at goodness is selfish, performative, corrupt. The tragedy is that if Dorian had truly wanted to change, he could have. He could have confessed his crimes, faced consequences, spent his remaining years trying to atone. But that would require sacrifice. It would require giving up his beauty, his youth, his freedom. And Dorian loves those things more than he hates himself. So He chooses to destroy the evidence rather than change the truth. The final irony, the ending of the Picture of Dorian Gray, is brilliantly ironic. Dorian spends the entire novel trying to escape aging, consequence, mortality. He succeeds for 18 years. But in the end, he doesn't die young and beautiful. He dies old, hideous, and alone. Everything he tried to avoid catches up to him in a single moment. The servants find a young, beautiful portrait and an old, corrupt corpse. From their perspective, it looks like a random old man broke into Dorian's house and died there. They don't understand what happened. They can't understand, because the truth is too strange, too supernatural, too honest for anyone to accept. But we understand. Dorian Gray spent his entire life running from his true self. And in the final moment, his true self caught him. The portrait was always him. The beautiful face was always a lie. And when you destroy the lie, all that's left is the truth. The mirror we avoid, Oscar Wilde wrote. The Picture of Dorian Gray as a warning, but also as a mirror. He wants us to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions. What would we do with eternal youth? What sins would we commit if no one could see them? What would our portrait look like if every cruel word, every selfish act, every moment of cowardice was recorded on our face? We live in a world of filters and facades, where we curate our image and hide our flaws. We're all Dorian Gray now, presenting a perfect surface while hiding the rot underneath. Social media is our portrait, showing the world who we want to be. But somewhere, hidden, is the truth, the real us, the ugly us, the version we don't want anyone to see. And like Dorian, we keep that hidden version locked away. We don't look at it. We don't acknowledge it. We pretend it doesn't exist, but it does. And eventually, we have to face it. Eventually, the portrait and the person become the same. Eventually, the truth wins. The price of beauty. The Picture of Dorian Gray asks us to consider what we'd sacrifice for beauty, for youth, for the world's admiration. And the answer, if we're honest, is probably too much. We spend billions on cosmetics, surgery, anything that promises to stop time. We worship youth culture. We discard people when they age. We're a civilization of Dorian Grays, terrified of wrinkles, desperate to stay forever young. But Wilde shows us the cost. Beauty without depth is empty. Youth without growth is stagnation. A life lived only for pleasure and appearance isn't life at all. It's just existence with better lighting. Dorian Gray could have aged gracefully. He could have let his experiences mark him, teach him, deepen him. He could have earned his wrinkles through wisdom and his gray hair through understanding. Instead, he stayed frozen, perfect, and empty. He didn't grow. He just accumulated sins. In the end, the most horrifying thing about the Picture of Dorian Gray isn't the supernatural portrait. It's the very human choice to value appearance over truth. That's not Gothic horror. That's just honesty. Oscar Wilde wrote, "The only difference between a caprice and a lifelong passion is that the caprice lasts a little longer." He understood that what we call love is often just obsession with a beautiful surface, that what we call morality is often just fear of being caught, that we're all capable of becoming Dorian Gray if given the right conditions and the wrong philosophy. The Picture of Dorian Gray isn't a ghost story or a supernatural thriller. It's a mirror. And if we're brave enough to look into it, really look, we might see something we don't want to see. We might see our own portrait, hidden away, recording everything we'd rather forget. We might realize we've been stabbing at the wrong canvas all along, because the real portrait isn't hanging on any wall. It's in us. It's been there the whole time. And unlike Dorian's, we can't destroy it. We can only decide what we're going to paint on it next. The question isn't whether you trade your soul for eternal beauty. The question is, what are you trading it for right now? Picture this. A revolution begins with a dream. Animals rise up against their human masters, claiming their freedom, building their own paradise. They write their laws on a barn wall in bold white paint. All animals are equal. But within months, that same wall will be rewritten. The dream will rot. The liberators will become tyrants. And by the end, the animals will stare through a farmhouse window and realize something horrifying. They can no longer tell the difference between the pigs and the humans. This is the story George Orwell wrote as a warning, and every word of it is coming true. This is Animal Farm. Published in 1945 by George Orwell, it's a deceptively simple tale about farm animals who overthrow their owner, but it's really about power, corruption, and how every revolution eventually devours its children. The dream of rebellion. The story begins on Manor Farm, a shabby piece of land in the English countryside where animals work themselves to exhaustion while their owner, Mr. Jones, drinks himself into oblivion. The horses pull plows until their backs ache. The cows are milked until they're dry. The hens lay eggs that are sold before they can even hatch. And at the end of it all, when these animals are old and broken, they're sent to the slaughterhouse. This is their life. This is all they've ever known. Until one night, everything changes. Old Major, the prize boar, the wisest animal on the farm, gathers everyone in the barn. His voice is deep, trembling with age and urgency. He tells them about a dream he had, a world where animals are free, where they keep the fruits of their own labor, where no human whip ever touches their backs again. He teaches them a song called Beasts of England, a revolutionary anthem about golden fields and liberation. The animals sing it together, their voices rising in the darkness, and for the first time in their lives, they taste hope. 3 days later, Old Major dies, but the seed has been planted. The pigs, being the cleverest animals, take charge of organizing the rebellion. 2 pigs stand out, Snowball, who is passionate and eloquent, full of ideas and energy, and Napoleon, who is quieter, more calculating, with cold eyes that seem to measure everything together. They develop Old Major's teachings into a philosophy called animalism. The central idea is simple but revolutionary. Humans are the enemy, animals are comrades, and all animals are equal. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it's about to be destroyed. The revolution explodes. The rebellion happens almost by accident. One midsummer night, Mr. Jones gets so drunk he forgets to feed the animals. Starving and desperate, they break into the storage shed. Jones and his men rush out with whips, trying to beat them back into submission. But this time, something snaps. The animals fight back. They bite, they kick, they charge. Within minutes, Jones and his workers are running for their lives, fleeing the farm in terror. The animals stand in the yard, breathless, stunned. They've won. Manor Farm is theirs now. They rename it Animal Farm, and the revolution has begun. The early days are euphoric. The animals work harder than ever, but now it's for themselves. They bring in the harvest faster than Jones ever did. Snowball paints the 7 commandments on the barn wall in giant white letters. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal. All animals are equal. These are the sacred laws of their new society. These are the promises that will be broken one by one. The first cracks appear, but even in paradise, tensions simmer. The pigs, because they're the smartest, claim leadership roles. They don't work in the fields, they supervise. They take the milk from the cows and the apples from the orchard for themselves, claiming they need extra nutrition for brain work. Some animals are uncomfortable, but Squealer, a brilliant pig with a gift for manipulation, explains it away. Surely, comrades, you don't want Jones to come back. And that shuts down every argument. The threat of the past is used to justify the corruption of the present. Napoleon and Snowball clash constantly. Snowball is full of grand plans. He designs a windmill that will bring electricity to the farm, making life easier for everyone. He's a visionary, always looking forward. Napoleon says nothing during the meetings, but his eyes are calculating. Then, one day, during a crucial vote on the windmill, Napoleon does something unthinkable. He lets out a high-pitched whistle, and 9 massive dogs, puppies he's been secretly training, burst into the barn. They're vicious, snarling, trained to kill. They chase Snowball off the farm, snapping at his heels. Snowball barely escapes with his life. And just like that, Napoleon is the sole leader. The animals are too terrified to question it. The lies begin to multiply. Napoleon announces that the windmill was actually his idea all along, that Snowball was a traitor, working with Jones from the beginning. The animals are confused. They remember things differently. But Squealer rewrites history with such confidence that they doubt their own memories. Surely, comrades, you don't want Jones to come back. And once again, fear wins over truth. The animals agree to build the windmill, working longer hours through rain and cold, their bodies breaking under the weight of stones. Boxer, the massive cart horse with a heart of gold, becomes the symbol of their sacrifice. His motto is simple: I will work harder, and Napoleon is always right. He believes with every fiber of his being, and that belief will destroy him. Life gets harder, rations are cut, the pigs start sleeping in the farmhouse, in beds. When the animals protest, Squealer points to the barn wall. No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. The animals don't remember the word sheets being there before, but the paint is fresh, and their memories are foggy. The pigs start drinking whiskey. The commandment is changed again. No animal shall drink alcohol to excess. Every rule is quietly rewritten. Every promise is bent until it breaks. The purges, terror comes to Animal Farm. Then comes the bloodshed. Napoleon calls a meeting and forces several animals to confess to crimes they didn't commit, conspiring with Snowball, sabotaging the windmill, plotting against Napoleon. The confessions are absurd, clearly coerced, but it doesn't matter. The dogs tear their throats out right there in the yard. Blood soaks into the grass where old Major once spoke of freedom. The surviving animals are traumatized, confused, terrified. They gather by the barn wall and try to remember the commandments. No animal shall kill any other animal, they recite. But when they look up, the words have changed. No animal shall kill any other animal without cause. The horror isn't that the rules are being broken, it's that the rules themselves are being erased. The windmill and betrayal. The windmill is finally completed after years of backbreaking labor. The animals are proud, exhausted, hopeful. Then a storm comes. The windmill collapses. Napoleon immediately blames Snowball, claiming the exiled pig snuck back and sabotaged it. There's no evidence, no proof, but the animals believe it because they need someone to blame. They rebuild. Again and again. Meanwhile, the pigs begin trading with humans, the very thing the revolution was supposed to prevent. They sell timber, eggs, grain. The animals are uncomfortable, but Squealer spins it as necessary for survival. Then comes the ultimate betrayal. Boxer, the loyal, tireless workhorse who gave everything to the farm, collapses while hauling stones. His lungs are failing. He can barely stand. The pigs promise to send him to a veterinary hospital. A van arrives. Benjamin, the old cynical donkey who stayed silent through all the horror, suddenly starts braying in panic. He can read, and he reads the words on the side of the van: horse slaughterer and glue boiler. Boxer is being sold for meat. The animals chase the van, screaming, but it's too late. Boxer, the hero of the revolution, is killed for a few bottles of whiskey. Squealer later claims Boxer died peacefully in the hospital, that the van was simply a repurposed vehicle. The animals want to believe him. They need to believe him. So they do. The final transformation years pass. Most of the animals who remember the rebellion are dead. The new generation only knows Napoleon's version of history. The farm is prosperous, but the prosperity belongs to the pigs. They wear clothes now. They walk on 2 legs. They carry whips. One evening, the animals peer through the farmhouse window and see the pigs dining with human farmers, playing cards, making deals. The pigs are laughing, smoking cigars, toasting to their mutual success. And then the animals see it. Napoleon's face and the human farmer's face are indistinguishable. They look from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it's impossible to say which is which. The animals walk back to the barn, and they look up at the wall where the 7 commandments once stood. Now, there is only one commandment left, painted in large letters. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The revolution is over. The dream is dead. And the animals realize with crushing clarity that they've simply traded one tyrant for another. The corruption of ideals. Orwell shows us that revolutions don't fail because the ideals are wrong. They fail because power corrupts those who wield it. Old Major's dream was beautiful: equality, freedom, dignity. But the moment the pigs tasted power, the dream began to rot. Napoleon didn't start as a villain. He became one, slowly, choice by choice, lie by lie. This is Orwell's warning. Idealism without vigilance is just tyranny waiting to happen. The manipulation of truth. The most terrifying weapon in Animal Farm isn't the dogs or the executions. It's the rewriting of history. Squealer doesn't just lie. He makes the animals doubt their own memories. He changes the commandments in the dead of night. He twists language until words mean nothing. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others isn't just ironic. It's the death of meaning itself. Orwell understood that when you control language, you control thought. And when you control thought, You control everything. The failure of the working-class boxer represents the tragic heart of the story. He's strong, loyal, hard-working, and utterly betrayed. He believes in the system even as it kills him. His two mantras, "I will work harder," and "Napoleon is always right," are the epitome of blind faith. Orwell is showing us that good intentions and hard work aren't enough. Without critical thinking, without questioning authority, the working class will always be exploited by those who claim to represent them. The cycle of oppression. The most devastating truth of Animal Farm is that nothing really changed. The pigs become the humans. The revolution comes full circle. Orwell, who fought in the Spanish Civil War and witnessed the betrayal of socialist ideals by Stalin's Soviet Union, understood that power doesn't care about ideology. It only cares about itself. The pigs didn't liberate the animals. They just replaced one oppressor with another, one who speaks their language and knows their weaknesses. The danger of apathy. Benjamin, the donkey, sees everything. He knows what's happening, but he says nothing. He's too cynical, too jaded to fight, and his silence makes him complicit. Orwell is telling us that evil triumphs not just when bad people do terrible things, but when good people do nothing. The animals could have stopped Napoleon early on, but they were tired, scared, confused, and so they let it happen, just like we do, just like we always do. George Orwell wrote, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." It's a sentence that sounds absurd, impossible, contradictory, and yet, look around. Look at the world we've built. Look at who holds power and who serves it. Look at how the promises we're given are quietly rewritten when we're not paying attention. Animal Farm isn't about a farm. It's about us. And the revolution isn't over. It never was. The question is, are we the animals looking through the window, unable to tell the difference anymore? Or are we willing to remember what the wall said before they painted over it?